Let me tell you a wee joke. After a long illness, a woman died and arrived at the gates of heaven. While she was waiting for St. Peter to greet her, she peeked through the gate. And there, around a beautiful table, sat people she loved and knew, and they said, "Welcome, oh, how nice to see you. It's great." Her parents were there, her friends who had loved her and died before her. When St. Peter came by, the woman said to him, "This is a wonderful place. How do I get in?" "Well," says St. Peter, "you have to spell a word." "What word is that?" "It's the word love." "Oh, L-O-V-E," she spells, and is in heaven. About 2 years later, St. Peter comes to the woman and says, "I need some time off. Could you stand at the gate for me, please, and guard it for a couple of hours or so, or for the day maybe?" She says, "Yes, I can do that." Now, as she was at the gate, guarding it, to her surprise, her husband arrives. "I'm surprised to see you here already," says the woman. How have you been?" "Oh," says her husband, "I've been pretty well since you died. I married the beautiful young nurse who took care of you. And then guess what? I won the lottery. I sold our little house that we had shared and bought a big mansion. And we traveled the world. It was wonderful." "And how do you get into this place now?" "Well," says his wife, "you have to spell a word." "Which word is that?" says the husband. "Czechoslovakia." This is one of 100 and 1,000 jokes set at the pearly gates, a popular image of entry into the presence of God, taken from the book of Revelation. It represents a basic human question. How do we get into God's presence, the source of life? How do we make sure that we reach the destination of our lives, live a fulfilled life? The Easter experiences of Jesus' resurrection had forced his friends to change. Never easy. The old ways and means to answer those questions we just thought about were no longer sufficient. Yes, temple sacrifice was still going on until the year 70, when Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. But was Jesus' death not much more than any animal sacrifice could be? And the 10 Commandments and all the many laws given in the Old Testament, are they lifted? Or how do they apply now, since they had known Jesus and his ways, which weren't always orthodox? And then there were these new people who also wanted to be part of the Christian community. How are you going to deal with them and carry on living in a Roman pagan world? The early church was buzzing with debate and at times with discord. Peter and Paul at the highest level debated and disagreed over the question how to integrate the new non-Jewish followers of Jesus. Would they need to be circumcised? It was a cutting question for those concerned. Today, we heard of Peter defending himself against his critics for not keeping the Old Testament purity laws. Peter explains that he's had a vision, that he's been told by God 3 times to eat any of the animals God has created. For because God made them, they are all right and blessed. And also, everybody can receive God's Holy Spirit. Jesus had called people to change the way they think and believe, to change the way they behave and act, and also with whom they interact. Jesus' radical openness towards people deeply challenged his friends and the people of his time. And is that not still the case? A few years ago, I found, through a link somebody sent me, the website called EternalEarthboundPets.com. It was a site for Christian believers who are expecting literally to be lifted up in the second coming of Jesus, which they call the rapture. And of course, if Christians get lifted up then to be with Jesus, the pets have to be left behind. So somebody got the idea that these pets would need looking after. So how do you do that? Well, he proposed that he would employ people, avowed atheists, so there was no chance that they too would be lifted up, that they would stay behind and look after the pets. To quote, "Eternal Earthbound Pet representative is a confirmed atheist and as such will still be here on Earth after you've received your reward. Our network of animal activists are committed to step in when you step up to Jesus. We are currently active in 22 states. Our representatives have been screened to ensure that they are atheists and animal lovers, are moral, ethical, with no criminal background, have the ability and desire to rescue your pet and the means to retrieve them and ensure their care for your pet's natural life. Cost, $110 per residence, $15 per additional animal. And regulations for which pets you could enter. Horses, donkeys, llamas and camels cannot be accepted in every state." This was supposedly no joke. But I just researched it again, and 3 years later, when the tax authorities looked at this website, the owner, an avowed atheist, suddenly said that nobody had ever subscribed to this service and that it was just him trying to point out the more ludicrous aspects of a literalist faith. Unfortunately, the reading and interpretation of the book of Revelation has often been hogged by literalist believers, end-of-the-world folks, as somebody has called them. Revelations is full of dramatic and cryptic allusions, and if used to interpret our times directly, it can lead to many silly things like determining when the second coming is coming, how many people will be saved. And it is a complete misinterpretation of the book of Revelations. For this book was written in the year 95 after Jesus' birth, and was written to be an encouragement to believers who suffered the persecution of the Roman Empire under the Emperor Domitian. Is that how you say him? Domitian in German? I forgot to check how you pronounce him. And he insisted to be called my Lord and my God. And Christians, being loyal to God, refused to pledge allegiance to him in this way and were punished for this refusal with persecution. John therefore writes the vision of Revelation, a fellow sufferer, to encourage folk to remain faithful. So far from predicting a terrible end to the enemies of Christianity, Revelation is trying to give strength, to call folk to faithful living now, in spite of the hardships that they were suffering. When he invites folk to leave Babylon and to live in holy Jerusalem, he's not actually speaking of Babylon and Jerusalem, but is trying to tell people to live now in the way that shows God's love and concern for his world. The last 2 chapters from which we've heard a selection paint a wonderful image of life as God intends it for people, for his whole creation. It's not a fantasy, but it's a revealed picture. Revelations is not prophesying, it's revealing. This is a picture of what life is intended by God already in its beginning stages in church and is already existing in God's presence behind the veil. It's a world of great natural beauty and abundance, flowing with water, full of ripe fruit, A world without pain and crying, full of light and open gates, where all people of the world will live together in peace and healed. It is the vision of our precious planet, which God has created in love, but without any of the sinfulness of humanity, which mars it all the time so terribly. And God, to crown it all, is living right among his people. So presumably the pets will be there too. We are still living on a troubled earth, and don't we know it? A place of constant change and choices.